a lot of talk in the recent days about how the Comelec is a little behind the times because it's still going to require face shields. I'm here to tell you that while masks are mandatory, face shields are optional. This is in line with the IATF guidelines for areas under level 2 and better. All right, now let's talk about the age of the electorate. The age of the electorate. Before you right now is the breakdown of the voting population of the Philippines by age, right? By age. As you can see, the millennial or Gen Z vote, 18 to 21 and 22 to 33. These are the high growth brackets where we saw the greatest number of new registrants. Right now, this bracket stands at 26.3 million voters. If you add to that, those are up to 35 to 40, then you're looking at the voting population that is more than 50% youth. The youth in the coming elections, in other words, of the total number of registered voters of around 65 million Filipinos. Again, we will have around 65 million Filipinos locally voting, and of that number, 54.39% will be coming from the youth. And this is very critical because I'd like to show you the context of that youth vote. In 2019, we had a voter turnout of 46.9 million Filipinos. The youth actually accounted for 22 million votes. 22 million votes, right? That's almost half of the total voter turnout. In 2016, going further back a little more, 16.6 million Filipinos voted to install the current president. Only 16. Was voted into office by only 14.5 million Filipinos. This means that in both 2016 and 2019, the 22 million voter turnout of the youth could very easily have spelled the difference. In fact, as I am wont to say, the youth will be shaping the outcome of the coming elections. And that's how important the youth are in 2022. Now let's talk about the impact of youth participation in elections. The most obvious impact of youth participation in elections doesn't actually start with election results. It's why? Because the more youth there are participating in the elections, the better the electorate can leverage new tech for a more responsive form of leadership. One of the things that we're noticing now is that our candidates are in fact responding to trends that they see on social media. And social is the digital playground of young voters. So having more youth participating in the elections means that we can leverage new tech for more responsive leadership. You can use this tech to surface new ideas and ultimately democratize public discourse. Public discourse will no longer be limited to the august halls of legislators, of salons, of press forums. Public discourse now resides in your pocket through these devices, right? You have access to public discourse and you can shape public discourse simply by being connected through new technologies. Second, when you have more youth participating in the elections, you will be able to introduce new knowledge into legislative work. one of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of legislators are operating really on old notions. You've seen many clips of legislators betraying their lack of understanding of how social media works, of what the internet actually does, of what social actually accomplishes. But with more youth participating in the elections, you can bring this new knowledge and bring it to bear into legislative work, into making laws, into real tangible efforts that will have significant impact on the lives of people. You can have social media regulations being made by people who understand exactly what social media does, what social media can accomplish. You're able to bring more people who understand how green economies work on a gut level because they're digital natives themselves and they're not just learning it from some abstract book or learned treatise. And with young people at the forefront of legislative work, we have a very good chance of pushing digital frontiers forward. Right now, for example, there are pending legislation that seek to regulate our ability to use social media. Is this kind of legislation something that is acceptable to someone who knows how social media works, to someone who knows what value social media actually has on a day-to-day basis? If you have more young people in legislative work, then you have a good chance of making sure that these new legislations emerging are in fact responsive and ultimately necessary for the betterment of society. Third, with more youthful people participating in elections, we will enable the passage of more youth-centric laws. And we're not just talking about technology or technological laws here. We're talking about protecting the young workforce. We're talking about future-proofing society so that the youth are not expended simply surviving from day to day, but are able, because they are protected by legal infrastructure, because mechanisms are provided for them by law, that they're able to prepare for their own future, for when they're not so young anymore. And so that the upcoming generations will have a better place to start from, rather than to just keep on doing the same grind that their parents had to go through. And finally, when you have more youthful participation in the elections, you will create a foundational generation of principled voters. A lot of people talk about changing the way we do things, and we try to do everything we can. Obviously, we try voter education, we try talking to people all over the place, we try to show them a better way. But ultimately, the one reliable means of securing a sea change in our politics is if we have a new generation of principled voters who reject the practices of the past, who reject, as a matter of DNA, things like dynastism, who reject things like, epal practices, people who reject these things on the basis of first principles. We're not there yet. But with the influx of Gen Z and millennial voters, we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. What's important is that we take these youthful participants in our election system and guide them and show them the proper way forward, so that in the end, these will be the young people who will carry our society into the future. And finally, I want you to promote meaningful youth participation in the coming elections. And how do you do this? Well, first of all, everyone should join the discussion. If you are one of the youth, it is important that you are not divorced from the mainstream of political discussion, that you do not set yourself apart and say, I am apolitical, I am not involved. It is important for you to understand that politics does affect you. And if you're not one of the youth, then it is your task to encourage the youth to join the discussion. In either case, it's important that we start talking about politics the way we should. That it should not be seen as a taboo topic for discussion. That it should be, in fact, part of our everyday conversation. Because ultimately, it is. Second, critical thinking. You must promote it and practice it. Critical thinking simply means that you refuse to accept things as they are given to you. You do not take anything for granted, and you take the effort to discover how things work behind the facade that is presented to you. So critical thinking is very crucial, especially now when we're in when we're in an environment where we are deluged by information, where it is the easiest thing in the world to simply throw up your hands and just accept everything as they come. Critical thinking is the first thing to go, and it is the first thing that we should be promoting and protecting. And finally, inform all of your opinions with facts, with sound analysis and objectivity. It is very important that while everyone is entitled to their own opinion, everyone also accept that they are not entitled to their own sets of facts. There must be a common ground. As far as the facts are concerned, we must be in agreement what these facts are. We must be able to call black, black, and red, red, and blue, blue.
Is seen on social media to these politicians campaign, not just but also the formulation of laws.
Kanina ni Sir James, no, yung mnemonic sa JCI that you need to join the discussion and letter C, yung critical thinking ng lahat ng mga tao, and of course, you need to inform everyone with facts. Na lahat naman tayo Gretchen, entitled na tayo sa opinion. Pero sa huli,
students here who will be joining us also online. First, let's call on the Executive President of the Iloilo Doctors College of Medicine Student Council. We have Mr. Bon Renel Pamadiala for his question. Hello, Bon.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, spokesperson James Jimenez. I'd like to re-emphasize that I really like the statement that we can form our own opinion. We are entitled to our own opinion, but we are not entitled to our own truth. With that, and in reference to your statements regarding the importance of social media, information on these platforms are posted regardless of veracity, to which the impact is yet to be described. How does the Commission plan on utilizing these platforms, with emphasis to the trust and confidence of the youth, to the good Commission to remain steadfast?
Mayong hapon. This is a very good question, and in fact a very timely one, because social media is in fact the new battleground for the elections. No? In previous elections, syempre, the battleground for the hearts and minds actually took place in media, in mainstream media, but now it is social media. Bakit? Because it is more immediate, it is more direct, essentially, to the heart of matters. Now, what is the Comelec doing? The Comelec is very active in promoting media and information literacy. We do that. We talk about that all the time. But more importantly, we partner with social media platforms. No? Right now, we have a very solid working relationship with social media platforms that allows us to identify fake news and misinformation online, so that we're able to, using their community guidelines, fast track or facilitate the taking down of these materials. Medyo wala pa tayo dun sa punto where we have a proactive control on the proliferation of fake news. Malayo pa yan. There is no law regulating the use of social media. So right now, the best that anyone can hope for is the ability to respond quickly. So what we need is the flexibility to actually react to fake news when it pops up. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. I don't know if you're familiar with whack-a-mole, no? Nakikita niyo yan. It's like on a sort of board, you have moles popping up, and you're going after it with a mallet. That's what it's like, fighting fake news now. But in that game of whack-a-mole, we have a lot of tools. And those tools include, again, like I said, partnership with social media companies. And they're being very good about it. You know, they're being very cooperative. Pero one very critical piece of the puzzle, of course, that this whole thing cannot work without is you, the voter, the young person who is actually a participant in social media. Remember, fake news, one of the best disseminators of fake news is us. Pag may nakita tayong account or pag may nakita tayong kwento that affects us emotionally at shinare natin ng walang isip-isip, we're spreading fake news. So, the fight against fake news in fact starts with us, right? But even if we're not part of the spreading, we should also not be tolerating it. So kunwari, nakita mo yan sa timeline mo, dapat call it out. Huwag kang mahihiya. Huwag kang matatakot na mag-report pag nakakita ka ng fake news. Huwag kang matatakot na sabihan yung taong nagkakalat kung kilala mo siya. So it's a broad-based effort. Hindi lang kami, hindi lang kayo, dapat tayong lahat.
So basically, Gretchen, no, it's a whole of society approach, yung pag-address natin dito sa disinformation. So thank you so much to Bon Diala, the Executive President of the Iloilo Doctors College of Medicine Student Council. Right now, Sir James, we have another question. Si Nadine Roman naman, Maria Nadine Roman, a student from Arellano University. Nadine, magandang hapon sa'yo.
Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, Sir James. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Maria Nadine Roman, an education student of Arellano University. And my question would be, what are the contingency plans of Comelec just in case there is a typhoon, calamities, or just plain pure blackout during the May elections? How can we safeguard the authenticity of the votes?
Mabuhay po kayo. Kayo ay magiging guro in the future, and ang mga guro po ay talagang napakahalagang partner ng Comelec sa trabaho ng halalan. At napakaganda ng tanong mo because ultimately kayong mga guro ang magiging ang magiging under pressure ika nga, no, sa mga ganyang sitwasyon. When we have conditions that prevent the conduct of free and fair elections, halimbawa nawala ng kuryente or binagyo, binaha, or nasunog yung ating polling place. Ang isa sa mga tools ng Comelec, of course, is to simply suspend the elections for that particular moment. Okay? This is not the kind of suspension that people are talking about na ipapagpa next year na natin yung halalan or iurong natin 6 months. Hindi ganun. We can suspend the elections for as long as it takes to solve the problem. So kunwari, may bagyo. So we don't hold the elections today because it's dangerous, but we hold it tomorrow pag lumipas na yung bagyo. We hold it immediately. Pag walang kuryente ngayon, we hold it kapag may kuryente na. The important thing is all of the elements for free and fair elections must be present. Ano ito? Ito yung mga botante. Kailangan the voters must be able to vote safe. Kailangan nandun ang Comelec at yung kanyang partners, yung ating mga teacher na siyang magsasagawa ng halalan, yung Board of Election Inspectors. And number 3, kailangan malaya na makakakilos yung mga teacher at mga botante para walang nag-iimpluwensya ng kanilang boto. Right? So we can provide that protection. Now, short of major catastrophes na katulad ng pinag-uusapan natin ngayon, sabihin natin, merong konting kaguluhan lang or merong nagka-brown out lang saglit. No? We do have contingency measures for that. Let's talk about power, for example. Meron tayong pinapakalat ng maraming generator sets sa mga iba't ibang lugar na kulang ng power. Not just that, we're also talking to the major power producers. Everything from Meralco to the smallest cooperative in the smallest barrio. Kausap natin sila ngayon at nag-uusap tayo para masiguro ang availability ng power supply. No? Pagdating sa peace and order, kausap natin ang PNP at ang AFP at sila'y katuwang natin sa pagsisecure ng ating mga polling places. Hindi sila pwedeng pumasok, hindi sila pwedeng lumapit sa mismong polling place, pero nandun sila at pwede silang tawagin ng mga gurong katulad mo kapag kinakailangan. So please remember, the coming elections, we're saying everyone should vote safe. Everyone should vote safe. And we are very serious about that guarantee.
Thank you, Sir James.
Okay, maraming salamat, Nadine. And we have a question here from the audience for Comelec spokesperson. Surveys have shown that the youth are mostly influenced by their family members and the least by their peers. What can the youth do to influence their elders? Lalong-lalo na dahil marami sa ating elders ang vulnerable sa fake news and Viber groups and Messenger. Ano pong sa tingin po ninyo?
Well, first of all, be gentle with your elders, okay? I have seen a lot of young people losing their patience at their fathers or mothers or their grandparents simply because the grandparents, believe differently. Wag ganun. The most critical thing that you can do really is to provide your elders with unpolluted sources of information. Ang nakikita kasi natin, yung mga elders natin, sila yung isa sa pinakamalaking target ng fake news. Sabi nga ni Miss Gretchen, mga group chat, yung mga YouTube videos na ultimately fake news naman talaga. Yan kasi yung mga kasama nila kuminsan eh. Yan yung mga nakikita nila sa telepono nila. And they don't have the access to other sources that we might have. Kasi tayo, attend ng mga seminar, labas tayo ng labas. Pero sila, especially during the pandemic, kuminsan naging constant companion na nila ang kanilang mga video sharing channels. So that's one very important way that you can help them. Karaniwan naman, yung mga information na galing sa mga channels na yan, kayang-kaya ninyong kabataan i-fact check. So do that for them. Help them out so that they can navigate this whole information environment that they find themselves in now. Isa pang maalala kasi natin, yung mga elders natin, galing sila sa panahon na may mga gatekeepers pa eh. May mga gatekeepers ang balita. So, ang tendency talaga is magtiwala sila sa nakikita nila sa newspaper or sa news articles, etc. Ngayon, syempre, iba na. Di ba? Alam natin, yung gatekeepers na yan, nag-leave of absence na yung mga yan eh. Di ba? So, ang dami nang naglalabas ng mga bagong information. So, tulungan natin silang i-navigate yung information environment na yan.
Patience and gentleness. Oo.
At syempre yung fact-checking, it begins at home. Hindi lang yan dapat
Yes.
online. Sa mga
Tama.
pamilya natin mismo. Okay, Sir James, may last question tayo mula sa ating mga estudyante. Kasama natin si Mr. Jeremy A. Reyes, isa pong estudyante, ang Student Council President ng Trinity University of Asia, College of Arts, Sciences, and Education. Jeremy, magandang hapon.
Hi, good afternoon, Director James Jimenez. Jeremy po, all the way from Antipolo right now. Sir, I have two questions for you this afternoon. Yung first po ay connected dun sa question ni Nadine regarding sa election and yung protection na binibigay ng Comelec. Kanina po na-share nyo yung guidelines when it comes to the voters, kung ano yung kailangan nila gawin para maging safe, especially right now that we are experiencing the pandemic. And me myself po, I am currently taking up education. Hopefully will be a future teacher someday. So ano naman po yung sa side po ng ating mga Board of Election Inspector na ginagawa po ng Comelec para po masigurado po na sila yung mapoprotektahan din po ang kanilang kalusugan sa panahon po ng election. Lalo na po sila po yung mga frontliners natin pagdating ng May 9. And then sir, yung second question ko po, ibigay ko na rin po, we are, kumbaga, yung sinabi niyo po kanina na majority ng voters po natin ngayon ay mga youth of today. And we all know that majority of the youth are baga sumasandal sa comfort ng digital world. So sir, how far are we sa full digitalization ng election, just like in the United States wherein they can vote in as fast as 5 minutes? And how can we make sure that our votes or the sanctity of our votes will be protected by the commission?
Okay, number one, as far as the teachers are concerned, there are protections under the law that are provided to them. No? For example, meron tayong insurance na ibinibigay na hinahanda para sa kanila. No? It's not going to be the kind of insurance that where everyone gets a policy or a plan. No? But you can be certain that if there are any medical contingencies, that they will be supported by the Comelec. No? But beyond that, speaking specifically of COVID, our teachers will be provided with protections, with PPEs, as well as training to make sure that they are conducting their duties in a safe manner. Kasama natin ang DepEd sa pagsisiguro ng safety ng ating mga guro. On the technological front, we are rolling out on a limited basis for now, but hopefully to expand in the future, the use of digital signatures to make sure that the teachers' identities are protected para makasiguro tayo na kapag sila ay nag-certify ng election results, talagang sila yon at hindi na aagaw ang kanilang identity at hindi sila na pre-pressure ng kung sino man. No? So these are the protections that are available for the teachers. Again, on top of the usual, like a medical fund, a legal defense fund, etc. So nandyan lahat yan. These protections are available for the teachers, and we hope that in the future, again, subject to budget considerations, we're hoping to expand those even more. Nabanggit ko lang, if our budget had not been slashed by 60%, we would have been able to give them things like additional hazard pay. We would have been able to give them things like added benefits that are way beyond what the law requires. Right? These are things that we were willing and already actually primed to give them. Kaso nagkaroon tayo ng matindi, and so that had to result in some tightening of belts. Second part of your question is how far are we from full digitalization? Medyo malayo pa for various reasons. It's not so much the lack of capability, but more the cultural sensitivities involved. No, one of the things that we noticed in 2008 when we pilot tested two kinds of electoral systems. We pilot test, kaya ng Pilipino, sanay siya gumamit ng papel na balota at mataas ang trust rating ng paper ballot results. Why? Because kapag may paper ballot, merong recount. kayang mag-recount. Kabaliktaran, yung nakita natin doon sa touchscreen technology. Sa touchscreen technology, katulad ng ginagamit sa maraming jurisdictions in the US, medyo mahirap yung gamit para sa karamihan ng botante. Remember, when you're talking about an election system, you have to have an election system that is usable by all your voters. And by all your voters, I mean every voter from the urban centers of the Philippines all the way to the farms outside of the urban centers. So, medyo hindi pareho ang level of technological fluency. Hindi pare-pareho ang technological aptitude natin. So, meron tayong mga kababayan na hirap mag-address ng touchscreen systems. Natatakot sila, hindi sila sure, and when they do touch the screen, they tend to make mistakes because it's not the kind of thing that they're used to, right? It's not the kind of thing that they're used to. So medyo malayo pa ang tatahakin natin papunta dyan. However, there are some signs that we are moving forward. For example, for overseas voting, we are planning on pushing for the authorization of internet voting, for example. No? Ang realistic timetable natin dyan is 2025. So that means that we are at least taking steps in the right direction. But just to circle back to your question, how far are we? Medyo malayo pa. But we are not losing sight of that goal. At some point, we will get there, but we will get there in our own time. No? Not to get there just to get there, but to get there because yung Filipino people, yung Filipino voters, ay handa na mag-level up ng kanilang automated election system din.
Great questions right there from Jeremy. And valid points raised by spokesperson James Jimenez. Maraming salamat. And spokesperson, just on, I guess on a final note for our youth voters, para po dun sa kabataan na gustong maging aktibo ngayong election day, maaari po ba silang mag-volunteer? Ano pwedeng nilang gawin para bantayan yung kanilang mga boto o kaya tumulong sa efforts ng Comelec, probably against fake news, probably against yung ating health protocols for election day, anything that can get those who want to get more involved started. And I guess your final message to our young voters here.
Okay. Kung gusto nyo ma-involve, maraming volunteer organizations ang tumutulong sa Comelec sa ngayon. Ang pinakamalaki siguro ay yung PPCRB, Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting. Sila ang ating accredited citizens arm for for poll watching and for the voter assistance desk. Maaring magandang simula yan for your journey of volunteerism to help in elections. Kung ayaw nyo naman ng ganyang klaseng structured na pagtulong, tinatanggap namin ang tulong ninyo sa pamamagitan ng inyong pagiging vigilant on social media. Gamitin nyo po ang hashtag sumbong ko at itag nyo kami at Comelec sa Twitter or ako at Jab Jimenez sa Twitter. Matatagpuan nyo rin kami sa Facebook, facebook.com/ComelecPH. Isa po to sa napakahalagang aspeto ng pagbabantay natin sa halalan, yung voter vigilance. And we are facilitating that with the use of our social media channels. Overall, bilang panghuli, inaanyayahan ko po kayong lumahok dito sa ating darating na halalan. Maganda po na activated tayo. Maganda na mulat tayo. Pero sinasabi ko sa inyo, walang kwenta yung galit ninyo sa social media. Walang kwenta yung sisigawan nyo yung television nyo kasi naiinis kayo sa mga politikong nakikita nyo. Walang kwenta lahat yan kung hindi kayo boboto. Ang pagboto ang pinaka-epektibong paraan para makamit ang pagbabagong hinahangad natin para sa ating bayan. Mabuhay po ang kabataang Pilipino, mabuhay kayong lahat.
Maraming salamat, spokesperson. At sana magkaroon din tayo ng youth debates, Youth forums and youth debates. Workable?
Kakaroon po.
Gagawin yun ni Sir James, suggest mo
Oo, baka lahat mag-attend. Maraming salamat po. Thank you. Thank you, spokesperson, sa iyong oras at talagang naliwanagan po kami sa maraming issue patungkol sa halalan. At talagang na-inspire ako doon, kay spokesperson.
Si Sir James Gretchen talagang sumasagot yan sa Twitter. Lahat talagang ini-engage niya. So itag nyo lang yung kanyang Twitter
O wag niyo naman
account.
siya i-flood yung
Oo,
kung
yung
relevant,
mga
lang yung mga
relevant lang.
tanong. Oo.
Okay.
Sigurado ko excited na rin mag-participate. Siyempre yung ating lawyers who are,
Oo.
probably want to get their debates in their
Right,
lines and ano. But speaking of lawyers, ang
Ito
ating
na.
susunod na speaker, Jules.
Okay, so Gretchen, mula sa Boses ng Kabataan ngayon naman, ang focus natin yung maalituntunin na dapat nating bantayan ngayong darating na halalan. Ito pong pag-uusapan natin kasama ang isang batikang
sa larangan ng election laws. He is a law professor